Discover how a billionaire's mother faced abuse. The maid's incredible act transformed everything. At 30, Sarah had become an expert in making herself inconspicuous. As she maneuvered through the vast halls of the Richter mansion, that skill transformed into a daily necessity, almost a form of survival. Her slender hands scrubbed dust from antique furniture while she melded with the shadows and remained invisible to the family who occupied these opulent halls. Coming from a modest family in Ohio, she had always embraced hard work as her true north, but at times, it felt like the weight of the mansion suffocated her. Each day merged into the next, the grand facade of wealth hiding the turmoil within the household. Yet, amid the gilded walls, Sarah found an unexpected connection with Evelyn, the once formidable matriarch of the Richter family, who now seemed reduced to little more than a carefully curated accessory in her son's colossal empire. It pained Sarah to see how Evelyn allowed herself to wither beneath the control of billionaire David, a man who exuded confidence and power but hid a cruelty that left scars, invisible to those outside their gilded cage. One scorching afternoon, while folding laundry, Sarah caught movement in the garden. Curiosity pulled her closer, careful to stay hidden behind the tall hedges. Evelyn was out there, her long sleeves rolled down, but something about her frail posture sent a jolt of concern through Sarah. Why did that mother's light seem dimmed? As she watched the sunlight catch a glimpse of Evelyn's exposed skin, shadows of bruises peeked beneath her cuffs. A surge of rage and fear ignited within Sarah. Should she turn away, silence her instinct to protect, and remain loyal to David's lavish lifestyle, or step in to confront the truth? As days turned into weeks, Sarah observed the scars on Evelyn's heart buried beneath her stoicism. Each time she quietly documented another bruise, each click of the phone felt heavier, stitch by stitch threading their fates together. David's obliviousness fueled her struggle, not for the mother who would never escape the gilded cage but for herself, who was losing her own identity amidst the chaos. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night, the sparks of indignation smoldered in Sarah. It all came to a head when she overheard a connection-shattering argument between David and Evelyn. Instead of retreating into the shadows, she found herself stepping into the light. With a voice she barely recognized as her own, she confronted David, challenging him with words that poured out of her heart. The backlash from him was immediate, a crack in the well-manicured surface of their world, his disbelief mingling with rage. Evelyn's eyes, usually so dim, flickered with a spark as Sarah's vulnerability became her newfound courage. Each shared glance between them anchored their fragile alliance, but with David hovering near, the risk of proximity to danger was paramount. As tension hung thick in the air, Sarah knew she would have to choose whether to step forward into this unfolding battle for dignity or shrink back into the shadows that had grown too comfortable. Just then, the door swung open, and David stormed into the room, disbelief etching his features as his eyes locked onto Sarah. The stakes had never felt higher, and the distance to liberation was razor-thin. The air crackled with tension as David stepped forward, anger radiating from him like a storm. Sarah felt a primal instinct rise within her, the impulse to flee, battling against the newfound clarity anchoring her. This moment defined the trajectory of her life. It was not only Evelyn's plight on the line but also her own identity, one that had been stifled far too long. "What do you think you're doing, Sarah?" David's voice was icy, coated with disbelief and a hint of contempt. The air thickened, the room shrinking as he loomed larger than life. For a fleeting second, Sarah considered retreating, her years of training in servitude whispering that silence was safer. But the familiar command of invisibility felt flimsy now. She wasn't merely a background figure. She chose to stand her ground, heart pounding in defiance. "I'm standing up for her," she stated, surprising even herself with the steadiness of her tone. David's eyes narrowed, a mix of fury and amusement flickering across his face. "You think you can protect her from me? You have no idea what you're up against." His disdain was tangible, igniting both fear and resolve in Sarah. The unyielding man who controlled her surroundings was unveiling a side of himself she never confronted directly. And there it was, his challenge ignited something in her. Not just for Evelyn, but also for the timid girl from Ohio who had spent countless days whispering away dreams in the shadow of this mansion. Ask the right questions, Sarah thought, leverage your proximity to the truth. She wouldn't yield to the storm, instead, she aimed to harness its power. You underestimate me, David. I know your secrets, the lies that keep this house standing. Do you think everyone can be bought? Each word felt like a hammer striking the anvil of her conviction. Evelyn, silent yet present, peered from behind her son, no longer a passive figure, but a witness to this confrontation. The lights flickering overhead cast deep shadows, mirroring the shifting dynamics at play. David's expression morphed quickly, the amusement fading. You're playing a dangerous game, he seethed, fingers twitching at his sides. As Sarah faced him, she scrutinized every feature of his imposing presence with a clarity that came from a decade of watching and absorbing. She even began to notice the subtle tremors in his facade, the cracks that revealed his own insecurities. The shimmering opulence that surrounded them suddenly felt less like wealth and more like a gilded cage teetering on the brink of collapse. I don't play games, she replied quietly, but her resolve resonated like a definitive heartbeat, synchronized with Evelyn's unreadable gaze. I care about her. It's time you're held accountable. In that instant, a tentative alliance formed between them, an understanding of resilience formed through shared suffering. The battle lines drew clearer. Her heart surged, she wasn't just someone confined to the background anymore. But just as she marveled at her bravery, David reared back, fury blazing anew. Then consider this your last warning. I can end you without breaking a sweat. His threat hung in the air, heavy and laden with implication. The moment spun out in Sarah's mind, the choice laid bare before her. Would she cower in fear or dig deeper into her burgeoning resolve? There was no more room for doubt, she was forging her path now, refusing to remain the silent witness. As the words clanged against the echoes of the past, the ground beneath her shifted. She realized that her decision was rooted not just in the need to protect Evelyn, but to reclaim her own voice. The question ceased to be whether she could confront David, it morphed into how this confrontation would change her. With newfound purpose spilling into her consciousness, Sarah set her jaw. The battle was just beginning, but she felt ready. We are not afraid of you, she declared, her gaze unwavering. Just then, a sudden noise from the hallway drew their attention, a quick, muffled sound, like the scuffle of a shoe against polished marble. Her heart leapt as the implications of an eavesdropper loomed large. What if others had heard? Before she could fully process this alarming turn, the door creaked open wider, and a shadow flickered just outside. Sarah's mind raced, strategies colliding like competing armies. Was this a chance to rally more support against David, or yet another threat? In that moment, she realized that the power dynamics were shifting not only within the walls of the Richter mansion but also within her heart. The stakes were rising, and she was dancing on the brink of an abyss that could lead her either to liberation or further entrapment. What awaited just beyond that door could either solidify her resolve or unravel everything she now stood for. The door swung open, revealing a figure half concealed in the shadows. Sarah tensed, every instinct honed for confrontation igniting within her. It was Danny, David's younger brother, his wide eyes darting from Sarah to David, confusion etched across his face. She recognized the duality in him, an outsider to his brother's ruthless world yet still entangled in its web. I heard his voice trailed off, uncertain but undeniably drawn into the moment. The tension in the room shifted subtly, drawing Danny closer to the fractured core of their conflict. David's jaw clenched, and he cast a menacing glance at Danny. This is not your business. Go back to where you belong. The venom in his voice dripped with authority, but the fight in Sarah deepened at David's blatant dismissal of his brother. No, Sarah interjected, surprising herself at the strength lacing her tone. He has the right to know. This affects him just as much. For the first time, she did not aim to shield someone, she aimed to confront the entire system that had kept her and those like her ensnared for so long. Danny shifted his weight, uncertainty mingling with the growing recognition of his position. "What are you talking about? What is going on?" It was as if Sarah could see the questions forming in his mind, the flickers of understanding beginning to light the way. This was a pivotal moment not only for herself but for someone who had the potential to break free from the legacy of manipulation that the Richter name carried. "David is not who you think he is," she started, summoning every ounce of courage. "He uses fear and intimidation to maintain control. We are not just pawns in his game." Each word felt like scaffolding for her courage, gathering strength and clarity as she dismantled the facade. The confrontation drew Danny further into the heart of the struggle. "But how do you know that? What can you prove?" His voice trembled as he dissected the tense atmosphere, wary yet intrigued. "I know more than you think," Sarah said, her chest expanding with the power of her knowledge. "I've seen the way he treats people, not just us, but even you. If you really want to see the truth, you need to open your eyes." Danny remained silent, his face a canvas of emotion, confusion, disbelief, and a dawning comprehension. She sensed the weight of her words hanging in the air between them. For years, she had swallowed her thoughts, choked down her observations, but here was a chance to paint a new picture, one where vulnerability was not weakness, and truth might be a refuge. Then, making a decision that could tilt the whole scenario, Sarah continued, "You're aware of the stories, the whispers about this mansion, right? The ones that circulate among the staff. Because the truth buried within those stories could set us all free." David's patience wore thin, the blistering anger radiated from him, a storm about to lash out. "You dare speak to him like that? You're overstepping your bounds, Maid." Yet, for Sarah, the title no longer stung. Maid, servant, subordinate, these words once defined her, but she had stepped into her own narrative, and those labels felt more like tools she could wield than shackles that could bind her. She turned her gaze back to Danny. "Will you join me? Will you see what your brother is hiding?" As if her words held the key to a door he never realized existed, Danny stepped forward, nodding slowly, resolve building. The air felt heavy with suspense, potential change looming large, the dynamic felt as though it had split open at the seams. "In that case," David interrupted, his voice like ice, "you both are about to learn just how dangerous it is to challenge me." Sarah glanced at Danny, and in that fleeting moment, a silent pact formed between them. The growing resolve fueled her determination, they were stepping into uncharted territory together. The lights dimmed in the room, shadows coiling tightly around them, portending the chaos that awaited. It was the moment of reckoning. She felt it in every fiber of her being. This confrontation could either solidify their bond or tear them apart. As Sarah squared her shoulders, proclaiming, "We will find a way to break this cycle," her heart raced with the urgency of impending battle. What consequences awaited them in a world where silence had reigned too long? Would they emerge victorious, or would David use his power to crush their burgeoning alliance? The tension crackled like static electricity between them, a single spark away from igniting a fire that could reshape their lives forever. The atmosphere thickened with the weight of David's threat, reverberating through the dimly lit room like an ominous drumroll before a storm. Sarah's pulse quickened, yet amid the swirling chaos of her emotions, clarity began to crystallize. She felt her sense of purpose solidifying, more than just a confrontation. This was the beginning of an uprising against the silence that had suffocated her for so long. Danny's uncertainty transformed into determination as he firmly met David's steely gaze. This was a pivotal moment not just for Sarah, who had long been trapped in the shadows, but for Danny, who was just starting to awaken from the haze of denial surrounding his brother's tyranny. "David," Danny said, voice steadying, "Sarah's right. There are things happening here that can't stay hidden anymore. People deserve to know the truth, and I'm done pretending everything is fine." David laughed, but it was hollow, devoid of genuine mirth. "You'll regret this, both of you. I have ways to make you pay." Fury rose within Sarah at the ease with which David wielded his power like a weapon. She felt a flash of something deep within her, a boiling conviction that made it impossible to remain complicit in his game. And how long do you think you can intimidate us? Your reign is built on fear, but I won't let it rule me anymore. She took a step closer to Danny, grounding herself in their newly forged alliance. Listen, this mansion is a prison, not just for the staff but for you too, Danny. You deserve to live outside your brother's shadow. We deserve to live without fear. Danny's brow furrowed, but his resolve hardened. What do we do? He asked, casting a sidelong glance at David, whose posture shifted menacingly, muscles taut under the threat of possible rebellion. That a wave of inspiration swept through Sarah. She had been an observer for too long while David had controlled the narrative. Now, she needed to turn that observation into action, a plan to peel away the layers of deceit surrounding them. We need to gather evidence, leverage what we have against him, she proposed. If we show the world who he really is, it could shatter his grip on this place and its inhabitants. The idea ignited something in Danny. There are documents, accounts of the wrongful dismissals, rumors about the operations in the basement. People speak. If we can piece everything together, we might stand a chance. They exchanged a knowing glance that vibrated with newfound hope. It was a shift, a transformative leap into territory that felt less perilous and more promising, each rooted in shared determination. Absolutely not, David spat, interrupting their moment of unity. You think you can delve into my affairs without consequences? You have no idea of the ramifications. I built this place, and I will burn it down before I let you destroy it. Every muscle in Sarah's body coiled in response to his threat, her instincts sharpening. His attempts to intimidate only stoked the fire within her, and she remained undeterred. But now she needed strategy. The concept began to take shape in her mind: enlist the help of others who had suffered under David's rule. She knew there were employees, quiet witnesses to abuses and injustices, whose stories could lay the groundwork for their rebellion. Their collective voices could dismantle the facade David had so meticulously crafted. Desperation flickered in David's eyes as he realized their intent. You won't find anyone who'll aid you, Sarah. People aren't as brave as you think. I'll make them brave, she asserted, conviction surging through her veins. Together, we'll show them that they matter. As the gravity of her words hung in the air, a spark ignited in Danny's eyes. She could see that he was beginning to envision the future outside the mansion's oppressive walls, one where he could redefine himself apart from David's tyrannical legacy. In that moment, Sarah felt something within herself shift. She was no longer just a maid, she was a catalyst for change. Perhaps she had always had the potential for leadership buried beneath the layers of fear. It was time to excavate that potential and wield it as a weapon against the darkness. With David staring down at them like a cornered animal, Sarah felt the strength of her resolve solidify. She had crossed a threshold and couldn't go back. The stakes had risen, heart pounds faster, breath quickens, but there was no turning back, not now. She had embarked on a path that promised uncertainty but also the possibility of liberation. Let the games begin, she whispered to Danny, determination brightening her expression. But as they squared their shoulders together, she couldn't shake the feeling an unsettling uncertainty hovered. Would David retaliate in ways they hadn't anticipated? As the tension swelled, the night prepared to unveil its darkest secrets. It was time to take action, to confront their fears head-on. Would they emerge victorious, or would David's grip prove stronger than their will to escape? With the threat still hanging in the air like a noose, Sarah turned away from David's cold gaze, aware that the path ahead required stealth and sharpness. The mansion felt different now, its opulence tainted by the darkness that lingered within its walls. Each echo of the floorboards beneath her feet resonated with the resolve simmering in her. She needed to act, not just to save herself but to empower those around her, the quiet souls who had learned to hide and adapt under David's reign. Tonight, we start small, she said to Danny, her voice low, carrying an urgency that could cut through the oppressive ambience. We can begin by speaking to the night staff, those who serve behind the scenes, those who have seen things they don't dare mention. Danny nodded, anxiety etched across his features, but determination glinted in his eyes. "Who do you think we can trust?" "David has eyes everywhere." "Trust doesn't come easy here, but fear unites us," Sarah replied, contemplating her next step. "We'll approach them together, let them know they're not alone. They can't be intimidated if they realize their silence is what feeds his power." The idea of vulnerability in others drew a memory from the depths of her life's experiences. Once, as a child witnessing injustices around her, she learned that the strength of community could erode fear. It had been a whisper then, but now it could roar. They slipped silently through dimly lit corridors, the shadows shifting as if sensing their growing resolve. The staff quarters were a realm that pulsed with whispered conversations and muted cries of desperation. Sarah thought of the women she had worked alongside, each sharing silent nods of understanding but without the courage to breach the walls of confidentiality that David had constructed. Tonight, that would change. With a deep breath, Sarah listened intently, guiding Danny to a small gathering in the break room where a few cooks and cleaning staff exchanged hushed warnings about David's recent behaviors. Her heart raced, not from fear but from anticipation as she stepped into the cracked doorway. "Can I speak to you?" The murmurs ceased, eyes turning toward her, a mixture of fear and curiosity reflected in each glance. Sarah felt the weight of her purpose bear down on her yet again. She had become the nexus of change, and she sensed the collective potential bubbling under years of repression. "What is it, Sarah?" one of the older cooks asked, arms crossed defensively. "You're aware of what happens to people who speak up?" "Yes," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "And I'm here to say it's time we stop being scared of this place. David is not untouchable. What he does in the dark will be brought to light." The initial hesitance lingered around them, palpable as the simmering tension from before. She began recounting not only her experience but the stories of those cloaked in fear. The wrongful dismissals and the unspoken tensions began to unravel. It didn't take long for them to recognize their shared struggles. One by one, faces grew resolute, and the charged atmosphere transformed from one of skepticism to a simmering collective wrath. Sarah's voice carried them, stitching together a quilt of discontent each time she mentioned the unfairness inherent in David's rule. Danny stood by her side, his presence giving the group strength, a dynamic that was beginning to create a shift, a glimmer of hope emerging from the clutches of despair. But just as Sarah felt emboldened by their responding energy, a sudden crash from the hallway sent chills slicing through their gathering. Fear gripped the room once more, and they all turned in the direction of the noise. David's voice reverberated against the walls, saturated with fury. "I can smell treachery, and it will not go unpunished." Panic erupted among the staff. The flicker of hope ignited moments before began to dim under the weight of his looming threat. Sarah's heart raced, the adrenaline coursing through her, galvanizing a response. "We stick together," she shouted, forcing herself to meet the frightened eyes around her. "We must confront what he fears most, our unity. If we disappear now, we're doomed. Stand firm." As they stood, trembling yet resolved, a powerful realization struck Sarah. She had unwittingly become a leader, the heart of an uprising that had started to unearth its strength. Now was not the time to falter. With David echoing his threats behind them, Sarah understood they were on the brink of a confrontation that would reveal not just their strengths but potentially unearth hidden capacities within each person who had gathered in the shadows. "Ready yourselves," she whispered to Danny, feeling the tide of change swell around her. They were no longer just whispers in the night, they were growing into roars of defiance. Yet the storm loomed ever closer. Would they withstand David's ferocity, or would his wrath extinguish their resolve? Each second pulsing with tension, she realized, the time to face their fears was upon them. The tension in the air felt electric, mounting with each breath Sarah took. The faint sounds of scuffling and shouting from the hallway crept under her skin, amplifying her instincts. She locked eyes with Danny, who mirrored her apprehension, yet there was an undeniable spark of determination within him. The decision was made, fear was now their enemy, and silence would only foster David's tyranny. "Stay close," Sarah murmured, her voice a low promise more than a directive. She scanned the room, the gathering of staff holding their collective breath, their unity suspended in that moment like a taut rope. David's booming voice echoed once more, shattering the stillness. "You think you can betray me? This will end tonight." With every word, Sarah felt the intensity of her purpose sharpen. "We can't back down. If we falter now, we are conceding to him," she whispered. "He is banking on our fear." Gradually, the fear in the room morphed into something else. Whispers transformed into quiet affirmations. One of the younger staff members, Marissa, lifted her chin defiantly. "We've lived in this shadow long enough. It's time we reclaim our voices." The others murmured in agreement. Each declaration of strength produced a ripple of courage, and Sarah harnessed that energy, channeling it with a force she never knew she possessed. "Look," she said, taking an assertive step forward, "I understand the fear that constrains you. I once felt paralyzed by it. But fear has only kept us shackled. David counts on our hesitation, he thrives on it." As the group shifted, Sarah sensed a shared catharsis blossoming among them. Tears began to sparkle in some eyes, not from despair but from the elusive flicker of hope. "He is only as strong as our silence allows him to be. Together, we can bring light to the shadow he has cast over us." Sarah's words ignited an unexpected shift in the atmosphere. The hushed intensity that saturated the room morphed into an action plan, a tangible determination. With each voice that joined in, she felt her authority deepening, not out of ambition but out of necessity. Their collective malaise became momentum. "Let us expose him," Danny suggested with fervor. "We gather what evidence we can, testimonies from those he threatened. We speak to the authorities." Sarah nodded, the gears in her mind whirling. Their first step would be to assemble what they knew, utilizing the skills each staff member could bring to the table. "We'll document every incident, every word he has ever uttered. They won't overlook our claims if we present them with facts. This requires strategy." Her resolve surged as she witnessed Marissa pull out a notepad, beginning to write down every incident she recalled, while others shuffled to gather into small groups, exchanging stories that had been suppressed within the confines of fear. Excitement mixed with dread, there was no turning back now, but just as their plans began to crystallize, fear rushed in anew, twisting the air. David's heavy footsteps echoed closer, the rhythm of his approach drumming an ominous tempo in her ears. "You think your petty little schemes can evade my watchful eye?" Images of the potential confrontation flooded Sarah's mind. What if he discovered their plans before they were set into motion? Would he dismantle their fragile alliances before they had a chance to truly form? "I know he is our enemy, but we have to move, and we have to be clever about it," she urged urgently. Every second felt like an eternity as uncertainty loomed over them. "Are you with me?" she asked, her voice unwavering. Each individual nodded, a silent pact binding them together, their determination knitted tightly in the face of rising danger. Sarah felt the weight of their gazes, the burden of leadership pressing down on her, but she also felt an exhilarating rush of purpose. They were ready to resist. They were ready to fight. "Let us go," she commanded, her voice rising above the encroaching dread. As they prepared to exit the break room, Sarah took a final glance. This wasn't merely about resisting David's cruelty, it was about rediscovering their identities, embracing their power. The mansion, with its toxic memories, would no longer dictate their destinies. Together, as an unshakable force, they would unearth the truth, but the moment they turned to leave, a shadow loomed against the doorway, a figure blocking their escape, smirking with a chilling certainty. They were no longer safe. "Where do you think you're going?" David sneered, his silhouette menacing. The climax had arrived, and now Sarah understood, it was time to confront the very fear that had clutched at her throat for far too long. Time seemed to freeze as Sarah stood her ground, her mind racing. David's imposing figure stretched across the doorway, an embodiment of the very fear her colleagues had grappled with for so long. But in that moment, the collective bravery that had been brewing inside her took the forefront of her thoughts. This was no longer merely about confronting David, it was a defining moment of her own growth. "Out of the way, David," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor of adrenaline coursing through her veins. His amused sneer did little to wane the courage flooding through her. Hearing her own voice, bolstered by the support of the staff behind her, added weight to her words. "You think you can intimidate us into submission?" she continued, the reality of her defiance piquing something she had buried deep within. With every breath, she felt a flicker of her true self emerge, a self that yearned for liberation and justice. "I'm not joking, Sarah. Do you really think you're going to walk out of here?" David leaned in, his eyes narrowing dangerously, but Sarah stood tall, staring him down. The clarity of her purpose enveloped her, and she recognized this was not merely a confrontation, this was her opportunity to redefine her boundaries. Behind her, Danny whispered, "Stay together," his voice a reassuring echo that supported her own resolve. She turned slightly to glimpse the determination among her colleagues. They, too, were ready to face the storm, and that collective strength infused her with newfound energy. "David," Sarah addressed him, her tone sharpened with authority, "we're not leaving this room without making our voices heard. You've silenced us for too long. We're not asking for permission anymore." The tone she used surprised her, rooted in conviction rather than fear. Each word propelled her forward into a confrontation she had only silently rehearsed in her mind. David's expression flickered momentarily. Was that a hint of concern? But the sneer returned, and he advanced, his intent all too clear. "You know I can destroy you," he spat, his voice a chilling reminder of the power he wielded. Yet, his statement only reinforced Sarah's resolve. She had lived under the weight of his threats for far too long. "Maybe you can try," she replied, her heart pounding fiercely. To her surprise, she felt a surge of inner strength propelling her to challenge her limits. The fear that had paralyzed her was yielding to clarity, her identity was intertwined with an undeniable fire to reclaim her life. "Enough." Danny's voice cut through the tension sharply. He stepped beside Sarah, bolstering her stance as the others shifted closer as well, forming an unspoken chain of solidarity. They were no longer individual pieces of David's puzzle together, they were a united front. "What do you think you'll do, expose me?" David laughed, but this time it felt feeble. The fury that had perpetually cloaked him now seemed brittle against their unity. "Yes," Sarah declared, her voice rising defiantly. "We will show everyone the truth. Our truth." It was as though the very act of verbalizing her intentions sparked fierce determination among the others, each nodding in affirmance, echoing her sentiment. Confidence swelled in her chest. Where doubt and fear had once found a home, clarity and purpose thrived. Sarah realized this confrontation wasn't merely about resisting David, it was about claiming her narrative, asserting her worth, and believing that she was deserving of respect. David's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, he seemed to falter. It was an opening. The fear that had long seemed insurmountable now lay cracked beneath the weight of collective determination. "Let us gather everything we have. We will hit him where it hurts," Sarah urged the group, every word laden with urgency and purpose. "If he thinks we'll remain silent, he's got another thing coming." As they redirected their focus, an unexpected thought flickered through Sarah's mind. What if she uncovered something that would change everything? A surge of curiosity washed over her, blending seamlessly with her growing determination. "Together, we will not be broken," she vowed, and as the words left her lips, another shadow loomed, this time a flicker of doubt. What if David had hidden more than just secrets? With every ounce of her being, she was ready to confront not just David but explore parts of herself she had long overlooked. There was no turning back now, the path forward embraced uncertainty and a storm of revelations. Yet as they stepped forward, ready to take the first step toward empowerment, a sudden crash echoed behind them, a flash of chaos that sent every heartbeat racing. "What now?" Danny exclaimed as the source of the noise began to make itself clear. More than one foe poised to suffocate their plans right before they had begun. Sarah felt the weight of impending conflict press against her chest, and she understood, the true battle had just begun. Amid the chaos, Sarah's instincts heightened. The room felt colder, charged with a palpable tension as the faces of her colleagues shifted from determined to fearful. She turned to the source of the sound, adrenaline coursing through her veins like a wildfire, igniting her focus. "Stay alert," she commanded, adrenaline sharpening her voice. The solidarity that had been forged moments ago felt vulnerable now, wavering under the shadows creeping closer. They were being hunted, and instinct told her there was more at stake than just the confrontation with David. Footsteps echoed from the other end of the hallway, heavy and deliberate. Each step pounded like a warning drum, and Sarah felt the brunt of her own fear rising in her throat. "Danny, assess the situation," she whispered, trying to maintain a sense of control. Danny's eyes darted around the room, searching for exits or tools that could be turned into weapons. As she watched him, Sarah could feel the metamorphosis within herself. The meekness that had once characterized her existence was being replaced by someone pragmatic and fierce, someone worth fighting for. Suddenly, a group of David's associates charged in, faces hard with intent, swords drawn within the realm of corporate betrayal. "You think you can defy him?" The leader sneered, his presence oppressive, cloaked in the familiarity of hostility. "We're not afraid of you," Sarah shot back, surprising herself with the ferocity radiating from her core. Every word struck a powerful chord, not only amplifying her strength but challenging the very foundation of David's reign. But confidence was a precarious edge. As she stood firm, a wave of doubt came crashing in. Were they truly outmatched? David's network was vast, ruthless. Each of his associates was more than a thug, they were pawns in a game she hardly understood. Yet, beneath that looming dread, a flicker of defiance came alive. Sarah's mind raced with strategies. She couldn't just confront David physically or verbally, she needed to play smarter. "Danny," she said, barely lowering her voice to a whisper, "we need to gather intelligence." "What do they know?" Turning back to the intruders, she felt a flicker of confidence ignite in her chest. "You underestimate us. This isn't just about David, it's about the truth." The leader laughed disdainfully, a hollow sound that echoed with arrogance. "Truth? You think your little uprising matters? We have the resources to bury you, remember that." But Sarah's eyes narrowed, and she felt her heart surge with indignation. David's associates hadn't realized it yet, but their threat was a mirror of her past. It echoed the verbal and emotional abuse she had endured. The path forward was not merely about exposing David, it was about dismantling the fear that had riddled her life. She locked eyes with each of her colleagues. They were no longer just victims, they were co-conspirators in their own liberation. "If we collect the right information, go public with it, we can cut off the head of the snake," Sarah pressed, feeling the strength of communal purpose course through her once more, replacing doubt with determination. As she felt the tide within her shift, the leader lunged forward, and instinctively, Sarah felt her body react, her hand reaching for a nearby pen. In that fleeting instant, she became acutely aware that her fight wasn't just against David's empire, it was against the misconceptions she had harbored about her own ability to enact change. A fierce spark ignited in her chest. She was ready to rewrite narratives, beginning with her own. Just as she took her stance, fierce and unwavering, a realization washed over her: the fight wasn't just about confrontation, it was about uncovering the strength she had hidden all along. And as the altercation began to unfurl wildly, a chilling thought froze her momentarily. What if the truth revealed something far darker than she had anticipated? "Mightier than you think, huh?" the leader mocked, drawing closer. "Let us find out," she replied, her tone firm. The air was thick with the scent of impending conflict, and her pulse quickened. She recognized that with every beat of her heart, she edged closer to not just a battle for her job, but a fight for her identity. The shadows of uncertainty loomed larger, but in that chaos, the clarity of her purpose was emerging, ready to take form. And just as the melee intensified, another crash echoed beyond them. This time, a voice trembled with desperation: "Someone, please. Help." What new challenge awaited them now? The sound of desperation sliced through the air, cutting past the tension as if it bore its own kind of urgency. Sarah's heart raced, but her mind was already processing the implications. What if this voice was someone entrapped in David's machinations, someone who could expose the truth they desperately sought? "Danny," Sarah hissed, her determination shifting gears. "We need to move, now." She gestured toward the door where the sound emanated, urging her colleagues to follow. The fear painted on their faces was palpable, yet within each of them flickered a growing ember of her own resolve. They stepped into the dimly lit hallway, every footfall echoing against the cold walls. The distant voice grew more distressed, pulling each of them closer to an unknown confrontation. With every stride, Sarah grappled with the physicality of her new persona, the inner lioness rising to meet external chaos. "What if it's a trap?" Danny whispered, his gaze darting toward the shadows lurking at either end of the corridor. "It could be, but it's also an opportunity," Sarah replied fiercely. "We need to know if David has something more monstrous hidden beneath the surface." As they approached the source, creeping closer, she felt the pressures of leadership pressing against her. There was no turning back. "Trust in your instincts, we're not going to let fear paralyze us now," she said, uplifting her team's morale, her own resolve firm. The door ahead cracked open, and Sarah caught a glimpse of the stricken individual inside, a woman, her face streaked with tears and tension. It all clicked into place as recognition ignited within Sarah's mind. The woman had been a trusted assistant who knew every hidden corner of David's operations. But what had led her to this moment of seeking help? "Please, you have to get me out of here," the woman cried, her voice trembling. "He's losing control, and it's worse than I ever imagined. They do things to people who know too much." A gut-wrenching realization struck Sarah like lightning. David's web of manipulation ran deeper than anyone anticipated. This was no longer merely about her job, it was about exposing a reality that could endanger lives, starting with this woman submitting her plea. "Then help us help you," Sarah urged, stepping closer, the sincerity evident in her eyes. "What do you know?" As the woman divulged information about their internal operations, Sarah felt a sense of empowerment consume her. Each detail revealed layers of treachery she had yet to confront within her world. She was reclaiming not only her narrative, but also that of others who had been victims of David's tyranny. However, imminent danger loomed as the pounding of footsteps echoed from behind them. An unmistakable wave of dread enveloped her, freezing her resolve momentarily. "We have to move," Sarah shouted, her heart racing. "Danny, help her." As Danny reached for the woman, fear churned within Sarah. They were hunted, and the clock was ticking. Yet in this chaos, she felt a bond forming not just with those beside her, but with every oppressed voice longing for liberation. "Use the information you've gathered," Sarah urged, realization overshadowing her own fear. The thought struck her that leadership came not from wielding power, but from the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths even when they hold the potential for devastation. With her heart pounding, Sarah called out, "We'll protect you. Stay close." As Danny assisted the woman and they scrambled for an escape, Sarah sensed the grit within. This confrontation was no longer about a single battle, it was a skirmish towards a broader declaration of freedom. The moment they bolted away from that door, the weight of empowerment flared within her chest, overshadowing the threats looming ahead. Yet, as they dashed through the winding halls, a chilling thought volleyed in her mind: could they truly make it through without fully understanding the extent of the danger surrounding them? Before she could answer, the shadows shifted behind them, and she felt a chill run down her spine. David would come for them, and this conflict was only just beginning. "Are you ready to face the truth, Sarah?" she whispered to herself as they rushed into the unknown. The pulse of uncertainty surged, and with it, the weight of impending revelations loomed closer than ever. In the aftermath of their daring escape from the shadows of David Richter's empire, Sarah and Danny found themselves in uncharted territory. The cold night air bit at their skin, but the warmth of newfound purpose enveloped them. Sarah had crossed a threshold she never expected to reach, no longer the invisible maid confined to the edges of a mansion but the catalyst of a burgeoning rebellion. As they navigated the unfamiliar streets, a sense of urgency propelled them forward. Each step felt like a declaration, a promise to reignite the voices of the silenced. They reached a worn diner, a refuge within the chaos, where weary souls seeking solace gathered. Here, amidst the clattering of dishes and murmurs of camaraderie, Sarah began to forge alliances outside the oppressive walls of the Richter estate, demonstrating a determination she had only recently unearthed. "I can't believe how far we've come," Danny said, breaking the silence that draped over their table. "Just weeks ago, I was lost in my brother's shadows. Now, we're poised to expose him." "Yes," Sarah replied, steeling her resolve. "But this is just the beginning. We need evidence, testimonies, everything we can gather to dismantle his empire." Her words radiated conviction, each syllable marking her growth into a leader willing to claim her identity. Over the next few days, Sarah tirelessly documented the experiences of the staff who had previously lived under David's grasp. Each testimony stitched together the narrative of manipulation, abuse, and fear. The bonds forged within that diner reshaped her understanding of strength, no longer a solitary pursuit, but a collective journey forward. As evidence mounted, a group of sympathetic journalists, willing to expose the lurking menace of the Richter Empire, came forward. Their willingness to champion the cause turned the tides in ways Sarah had only dreamed of. Yet, it was not merely about vengeance against David, it was about standing in her truth. "We will reveal everything," one journalist declared during their first meeting, enthusiasm rippling through the room. "This isn't just a story, it's an awakening." With each story shared, each secret unveiled, Sarah's confidence solidified. She had become a beacon of empowerment, not just for herself, but for a network of souls that yearned for liberation. They held power not in secrecy, but in unity. The day of reckoning arrived when the press conference was laid out. Reporters filled the room, cameras poised, notebooks ready. David was seated at the opposing end, a serpent cloaked in polished confidence. The atmosphere crackled with tension as Sarah approached the podium, her heart pounding in time with her resolve. "Today marks a new chapter for those who have been silenced," she began, her voice steady and resolute. "We stand not just for ourselves, but for every individual who has suffered under the weight of tyranny. This is about reclaiming our voices." As she recounted the harrowing tales of abuse and manipulation, David's facade began to crumble. The air buzzed with disbelief as the truth unfolded, revealing the shadows of his empire. Sarah could feel the tide of the room shift, no longer a victim but a force of change. The narrative she had once played a mere role within transformed into her own story of triumph. The news spread like wildfire, echoing against the walls of privilege built on manipulation. David's empire spiraled into disarray, revealing the cracks concealed beneath the polished layers. His attempts to maintain control rebuffed by the collective will of those he had oppressed, Sarah had sparked a movement that pulled others from the shadows into the light. A few weeks later, sitting in her modest apartment, her reflection returned a different woman, a woman of substance and strength. She no longer hid her talent for leadership, she embraced it. With a sense of solid confidence, Sarah began to implement programs focused on supporting victims of abuse in other realms of life, stepping beyond her initial goals to build an environment of safety and empowerment for all. "Sarah, you've really transformed," Danny said one evening as they discussed the future over dinner. "This journey has changed you." "I've finally become who I was meant to be, someone who fights for what's right, rightfully," she replied, a smile spreading across her face. The satisfaction of the fight was not merely in victory over David, but in her realization of value, identity, and purpose. As she gazed out the window, feeling the weight of the past lifting, her heart fluttered with pride. She had conquered not just the darkness of David Richter, but the doubts within herself to emerge triumphantly. Sarah knew this was the beginning of a legacy committed to truth, empowerment, and freedom, a narrative she would not only cherish but continue to craft. The past didn't define her, it had merely set the stage for her most significant performance yet. The moment had arrived for you to embark on your own journey of transformation. Embrace your potential now. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support matters. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible transformation. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. You need to subscribe now. this is the moment to show your support and stand with those who overcame their shadows. Don't wait even one more second to share.